welcome everyone, and we're glad that you can join us as we continue this conversation through the Sermon on the Mount and words to build a life on. And we've had such a good time doing this, and obviously this is one of our strategies for teaching during COVID and our time of social distancing and not being able to gather together. And so we're really thankful that we can meet and have these conversations, but we're really thankful for all of you too for joining us and listening to us or watching us. And so I think that this has been a great way for me to prepare and to teach for my congregation. So hopefully it's good for your congregation as well.
I'm sure it is.
Sure it is.
The main thing is it's been good for me, and I hope it's been good for others. But as we've said almost every week, what we're trying to do here is find this solid ground to kind of build our lives on, because what a screwed up year we're living in.
Right.
I think we're just all looking for where's the bottom, where does this end? And so having this weekly rhythm of coming back to conversation around the words of Jesus, this is solid ground for me and what I'm looking for. So
yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah.
It's really good. And by the way, just in case there is someone new listening, my name is John, and I'm the pastor of Becker's Table in the Crossroads. And this is my colleague, Rustin, who is the pastor of Vox Day in Belton, Missouri. And we have been good friends really since the time that we started our churches. And so this is our conversation that we invite you to join and engage with us. So today, Rustin, we're continuing in Matthew 7.
Yeah.
And I think what I want to say to start this conversation off is that when I read through this passage, and it's a rather long passage, I'll give you warning, that we could have broken this up like we did the last one, but we chose to do it all together because hopefully you'll see why. Yeah. But when I look at this passage, if I was going to sum it up, I feel like these are the words of almost a father figure, or at the very least it's Jesus elaborating on God as Father. And I feel like we are playing the role of children that are being sent out. And so the visual image I have is of dropping my kids off at college. So I went through that for the first time this year, where we dropped my son off at K-State and left him, and that is such an emotionally excruciating thing as a parent. Nobody had warned me. I didn't know it was, but we were just filled with emotion saying bye to my son as we drive away, and it's this real momentous thing. In fact, I could get caught up and choked up just thinking about it, because the thing about it is I didn't anticipate it being emotionally difficult, because I know that we're still going to see him, and I mean he's going to come home for the holidays, and he's going to be home, and our relationship is going to continue, our journeys together are going to continue. But what I realized when I dropped him off is, oh man, our relationship will never be the same again. He's starting that part of his life where he is what Carrie and I say is that he's self-parenting. He doesn't, we're still his parents and we still care so much. But he kind of needs to be parenting himself now. He needs to be making decisions. And we just hope that we have instilled him with the wisdom that will help him to make good decisions. But there comes a point in time where we just trust that our kids are self-parenting well. All of that to say, when I look at this passage in Matthew, you have to keep in mind the Sermon on the Mount is beginning to wind down. This part of Jesus' teaching is beginning to close up, and I get the feeling that Jesus' tone is changing into a sending mode, and I get that visual image of him dropping us off at college and being like, man, I hope the best for you guys. I really want the best for you, and here's the last words I want you to hear, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think you can escape the cumulative effect of the sermon so far. And I think as a teacher, I don't know if you feel this or not. I'm sure you do it intuitively. If not, that the things you say up front in a sermon can be kind of light and they can kind of stand on their own. But by the time you get toward the end of presenting a sermon, what you're saying now has all the weight of what you've already said. And so you handle it a little differently. There's more nuance as you get in deeper and into like, how does this work out in real life? And I do think we're in a section that's like that. It's taking into consideration everything that we've been through so far.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways to approach this, and I'm not convinced that any one way is right. I mean, so we were reading some commentaries, and all these commentaries will say different things. There's a ton of great things to say in this. In fact, we were talking about.
I'll let you know.
Okay. Let me know when I veer.
Yeah.
But you were even bringing up like, man, I want to say this, but I don't want to take us off on the tangent.
Yeah.
I want to say this, but I don't want to.
It's
There's
incredibly
so much to
dense,
say.
and you'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, every line in this is famous, as we've been saying throughout. This whole thing is so famous, and there's potentially some of the most famous lines from the Sermon on the Mount are in this section today, and we're just going to kind of glide over them,
right?
But on purpose. Yeah.
Not coincidentally, as Jesus is sending us out, really, or leaving us, dropping us off for our self-parenting phase.
Yeah.
But I think that where I'm going to start is not at the beginning. I'm kind of famous for this, not starting at the beginning of this pericope, but kind of jump into maybe a little bit of the middle. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think that it's structured in a way in which it kind of is like this, And so we're going to get to that middle part first, and then we'll back up. And you guys will follow. You'll follow.
It's easy.
Yeah, I have confidence. This is... again, chapter 7, and you start in verse 13. We're going to start in verse 13. And in fact, Russ, I'll have you read this. This is 13 and 14.
Okay. Jesus says this. And you'll recognize it because it's familiar.
It's familiar.
Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Yeah,
so again, very familiar passage. The narrow and the wide gate.
Yeah.
I always think of Robert Frost and the road most traveled, or the road least traveled.
Yeah.
So here we are, and I think that as Jesus is getting ready to send us out and maybe leave us to be on our own, which isn't really the case. We'll talk more about that in a second. Yeah. I think that the crux of what he wants to say is this. That there are a couple of different ways to live. Yeah. And one of them is a narrow gate, and one of them is a wide gate, and only the few find the narrow gate. Now, it's worth us, because this is so overly familiar, it's worth us just pausing and asking, what is Jesus really saying? What does he really mean? Because I believe that this, as well as so much, especially in this section of the Sermon on the Mount, can be read, through an egocentric lens. Okay, and that's what I want to guard against, because being pretty ego-driven myself, I think most of my life I've read this in maybe especially as a 4 on the Enneagram. When I read that there's a narrow gate that only a few find, I'm like, that's me. I want to be the few. I don't want to be at the masses. I want to be the few. Yeah. It's the Marines, the few and the proud. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a military guy, but every time I see the few and the proud, I'm like, maybe I should enlist, because I want to be that. I want to be the few, and I feel like.
But you're a 4, so you're like, do I look good in combat boots? Or?
How does it look? How will people see me? What does my storefront say? But I think that there's a way to see this as in a way that boosts our ego and makes us feel like we're part of an elite group. Yeah. Like, boy, let alone what is the narrow gate? I think that probably because I was raised in a youth group most of my life, I've thought, well, the narrow gate means the people that don't smoke and drink and sleep around. Right. And that's me. And so I'm morally superior to everyone, to all the masses, and us people of the narrow gate who don't know how to drink or smoke. Right. We are
and of all the people of the narrow gate, then you became a pastor, a leader of those people. So you're further separated than and above.
And let's just say it, better than. Yeah. I'm better than. I'm an even smaller gate. Yeah. Yeah.
Look how good I am, Jesus. Yeah. I'm doing it.
The smaller your gate, then the better you are. Right. And there's this. You know what I mean?
Well, we're laughing because. But hopefully old enough to see how painfully true that those motivations are and how misguided we are.
It's an egocentric thing, and I don't know that. In fact, we should know by now that that's not the purpose. We just got through reading about how we have planks in our eyes,
that's that whole point of like everything this is cumulative.
Yeah.
We're holding together things that Jesus has already said. So yeah, he's already said that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, not to be judgy and. But there's something about this that rings true, though. Again, I'm going to keep pushing us back to that visual image of leaving your son or daughter at school or wherever that you leave them for the first time, and they're adults or whatnot. There's something that rings true about this. Like I could see myself wanting to look at my son Palmer and say, there are really two different ways to live, and one of them is the path that most people take. And one of them is a path that not as many people take. But what does that really mean? Does that mean be better than everyone around you? Does that mean
be different for?
Yeah, you're going to be morally superior than everyone around you, or so what? What I thought maybe we would do, Rustin, is just I just want to look a little bit at the whole Sermon on the Mount that's come before us. So we take 2 steps back and we look at everything Jesus has taught. And if you think about it, it's all been good, obviously, but it's so difficult. Yeah. This is not the way that most people live. I mean,
I mean, there's a reason that we take all these sayings and turn them into just aphorisms that we stick on our refrigerator, but we have no intention of actually doing. And quite honestly, some of the most brilliant minds in history have looked at these passages and just tried to figure out, well, surely Jesus didn't mean to actually do that, and so how do we spiritualize that to make it livable for us?
Right.
And of course we are going to do the same thing, and we do it even more damage by separating them out into separate statements that don't hang together. You fall more even into the trap of what comes naturally, which in our case, culturally, is always going to be selfish ego. What it is that makes much of myself. Which is certainly not what Jesus has in mind based on everything that Jesus said and did.
Yeah, I mean, when we look culturally as well, we see what is easiest and most comfortable and most efficient with the less cost, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But so we go back through the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, if you start at the Beatitudes, is there anything difficult about the Beatitudes?
I mean, if you just want to read for challenge, I mean, everything about it. Being poor, mourning, being meek, hungry and thirsty for righteousness. That we found out this year, that's no fun. Showing mercy and being peacemakers and being persecuted. I mean, he's just listing off things that I don't want any part of any of that stuff.
It all sounds difficult.
It's hard. That's just the opening kind of salvo of the whole thing.
It's all counterintuitive to where the culture is.
Yeah.
And then we move on to not being angry.
Right.
Not lusting, working towards reconciliation, which again opens up a whole conversation about being vulnerable and leaning into vulnerability.
Yeah, not getting revenge.
Yeah.
I mean, how about just this one alone? Love your enemy.
Yeah, you can stop right there. I mean, those of us like you and me that actually have enemies, we understand what that.
It's hard.
What that is asking.
Yeah.
The power dynamics involved in the Sermon on the Mount, and being true to your word, going an extra mile.
Yeah. Doing good things like praying and fasting and giving, but don't get any credit for any of it.
Yeah.
Do it quietly and privately.
Yeah. Or how about this one? Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing. Even though we've kind of broken these down and talked about them and made them relatable and stuff, there's nothing easy about any of this. It's not easy, and so we would certainly want people to know this is not an easy journey. Don't serve money.
Yeah.
You know what? Don't serve money. And after I get through telling you not to serve money, don't worry about anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, in a sense, as we said, is a way of Jesus recognizing that what he's calling us to is something hard, that he stops and says, now, don't worry. And yet, for those of us who worry, that seems like another hurdle we have to jump over. Okay, now I have to do all this, and if I worry, I'm somehow not doing it right.
Yeah.
Great.
Totally. Radical trust for our daily needs. Not worrying about those things. And then even last week or the last couple of weeks, not judging other people, not judging and doing your own plank work on yourself and seeing the plank in your own eye. I mean,
and how impossible is that in 2020 on Twitter? You know, it's a rough time.
If anything else, I think the narrow and wide gate is a commentary about choosing to live in the way of Jesus, which is a rigorous way to live. Yeah. It's a blessing, and there's a lot of peace in it because we're slowly coming into harmony with ourselves and the way we're created. But there's nothing easy about it.
Yes, I think that you're acknowledging two truths that are hard to hold together. One, that it is difficult, and no preacher should ever stand up and smile and say, "This is easy."
Right.
That would be lying. But it's also true that this is the only way to live in reality.
Yeah.
And if we persist in it, there is blessing in it and goodness in it.
Yeah.
Both are true. You can't really say one without the other.
Another way of saying that, two truths that we don't hold together, is difficult and peaceful. Like they can be together. Yeah. Peaceful doesn't necessarily equal easy. Yeah. I mean, sometimes when we have nothing to do is our most anxious times. Yeah. So the difficult and peaceful.
Yeah, that's well said.
I like how Eugene Peterson says this verse in The Message. This is the same passage we just read in verses 13 and 14. He says, "Don't look for shortcuts to God." He says, and I like it, this next part, the market is flooded. The market, and the public, what everyone does. The market is flooded with surefire, easygoing formulas for a successful life that can be practiced in your spare time. Don't fall for that stuff, even though crowds of people do. The way to life, to God, is vigorous and requires total attention. Yeah. I mean, so when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, that's the kind of thing that I would want to say to Palmer when I leave him at college. Yeah. That's what I want to say. Yeah. Don't look for shortcuts. Yeah. Don't do what the masses are doing, because the crowd will always be doing something. And again, I'm not talking about partying, which although at college you think of that, right. But I'm talking about the way that you're being taught to live. What you want to pursue in life, what you're after, what your values are. Yeah. All of that. Don't necessarily fall for what the crowd is falling for.
Yeah. I mean, those very rhythms and pursuits, as we have taught over and over, it's those things that end up shaping our desires and our heart and our orientation through life. So you got to be real careful what you buy into and what you say yes to.
Yeah, totally. And this requires our total attention. Because what you're doing is you're following God, but following God and not being pulled into the current of the culture is going to require this rigorous, attentive life. Yeah. And I even
and it's not just as simple, because as you talk there, I think one of the mistakes that we make is saying, "Oh yeah, okay, anti-culture then. We'll just be anti-culture and we'll pull into our enclave and so that's not what you're saying. You're talking about an attentiveness it takes to live in culture and for culture, while not being swept up in the things that animate it."
I'm glad you brought that up, because I would even suggest that forming your own little enclave, we're just surround ourselves with our Christian people. Yeah. That's actually an attempt to make things easy again. It's all an attempt to avoid the rigorousness that Jesus' way of life really is. Yeah. And speaking of that, I mean, you and I have talked about this before. The early church, didn't call themselves Christians, and Christianity was not a term that was coined until centuries later. The early church called themselves the Way, people of the Way, and just acknowledging that what this is all about is that Jesus taught us a way to live, which is outlined right here in the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah. And we are distinguished by the way that we live. Yeah. And it is a way that's a little countercultural, but it's not enclaved at all.
Yeah. But as a way has real implications in real lived everyday life. And so it's not something you can put like a book back up on the shelf and I'll get it back out again on Sunday morning when I want to deal with this. This is an everyday, incredibly upsetting to every level of your life. Also, I would say, having done it for so long, that it continues to be incredibly upsetting, but also incredibly alive and good.
Yeah. That's why the whole equally yoked thing in marriage, it's not so much of I don't like to think of it as a commandment, like, oh, you better do this or you're going to be cursed, I think of it more as like common sense, like this is going to help give you peace. Because if you're trying to give rigorous attention in your life to living in a way that is not the current of the masses,
Yeah.
then if you marry someone who's in the current of the masses, it's just going to be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. That's teaching. That's I guess another sermon.
My
for
wife
another...
can tell you all about it.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. It's just one of those things. You want to. It's hard enough to swim upstream, but if you have, you want everyone that you're yoked to be swimming upstream too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, that's a sermon for another time. But
yeah. Well, it's true in marriage and true in church communities and
yeah. Business.
It's hard enough without being alone in it, right?
Right.
You need community.
Exactly. So, guys, I'll tell you, and Rustin knows this, the reason that I wanted to start with verses 13 and 14 is because I see this really important bit of advice to the kid that we're leaving to college, or to Jesus leaving us, as he's not really leaving us, as this next piece will show, but you know what I mean. Figured he's not leaving us any more than I really left my son. My goodness, I'm texting him every day.
Right.
Yeah. So I skipped to these verses because the way this is set up, those verses are couched. And I think it's important to notice this. They're couched with an encouragement that comes before it, and they're couched with a warning that comes after it. So it's like, okay, the narrow and the wide gate, choose wisely, discern wisely, be attentive. Now, he precedes that with this encouragement, and he follows that with a warning, all in the name of like fatherly advice, as I get ready to send you out. I like sending you out more than leaving you. Yeah. I've sent my son out. I haven't left him.
Right.
Yeah. So why don't you, Rustin, read the first part?
Okay.
Yeah, this is the encouragement.
This is Matthew 7, verses 7 through 12.
And this is the encouragement.
Yeah. And it'll be familiar once again.
And as we said, there's so much to say about this. So you all have to forgive us for not going into great detail, but
Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil,
right?
Thanks, Jesus. If you know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Okay,
now again, this is his teaching right before he says the narrow and the wide gate.
Yeah.
This is an encouragement.
Yeah.
I'll just ask you, Rustin, what encouragement do you hear when you read that?
Well, I don't necessarily identify with being thoroughly evil.
I knew you were going to take us there.
But the point is made that no matter what I think of myself, God is that much better. And I know how much I love my boys.
Yeah.
And how good I am to them, or try to be. So I find that really encouraging, that God might be even better than my heart toward my kids, knowing that I've got my limitations and selfishness and, the things that I would struggle with.
Yeah.
So that comes to mind.
Yeah.
God as parent. I mean, this is throughout Old Testament. God as father, that sort of thing. But in a new way in Jesus, this kind of engagement of a father who's like really present. Maybe not everybody even knows what that's like, but who's involved in. I don't know.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I think the metaphor of leaving our kid at college is so powerful for this whole teaching. Is because I feel like God is not saying I'm leaving you any more than I was saying I was leaving Palmer. Yeah. He is saying he's basically saying, or Jesus is letting us know that God will always be with us. Yeah. In the same way that I want to shout out to my son as we drive away from Marlette Hall, hey, I'm right there, a phone call away, a text away whenever you need me. This is God saying, I'm here.
Yeah. If you need something, call me.
Yeah.
And you intend to meet that need as best you can.
Yeah.
With Palmer, but the difference is with God is that there's no limit to what he can actually do.
What he can do.
It might take you 2 hours to drive to Manhattan.
Yeah. He's right here with me.
Yeah.
But that's so true. It's just, let me know what you need.
Yeah.
Be sure to ask.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to do whatever I can.
And when I leave Palmer at school, I want him to be sure to ask about material needs, which he does. Yeah. But I also want him as a parent, let me know when you have other needs, like emotional needs.
Yeah.
When you need support, when you need anything, just let me know.
Because part of meeting his needs is you want to be in relationship with him.
Yeah.
And even more so now that he's off at college.
Yeah.
Like you're looking for any opportunity. Hey, what can I do? How can I insert myself here? And let's talk about that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're in.
This is an encouragement.
Yeah.
Because this was unusual talk, if just unheard of talk for a king. And remember, Jesus is talking about God's kingdom. He's talking about a kingdom. He's using kingdom language here.
Yeah.
And you have to understand, kings in those days did not really care about the welfare of their subjects. I know that's unusual for us because our leaders at least want us to think they care about our welfare. But a king in that kind of a structure, they don't care about, they don't have to promote themselves. There's no election.
Yeah.
There's no vote. Their subjects were mainly there to help them flourish and to help the kingdom, of course, flourish, which helped the king to flourish. Yeah. Subjects were used for profits. Allegiance to the king was expected. Mm-hmm. Allegiance to a king was demanded. Yeah. If you didn't give your allegiance to a king, you might lose your head.
Right.
You know?
It's the divine order. It's not questioned. It's
the divine order.
Yeah.
So I would say to gain the ear of the king was an extraordinary thing. Usually you had to have some position of influence. You had to be someone of privilege to get the ear of the king. Yeah. So keep that in mind and recognize what an encouragement this is. This is Jesus saying, the king of this kingdom will give you anything you ask for, right? Yeah. He is here and he cares about you like a father leaving his son at college.
So so to our ears, or to their ears, this might have been a shocking.
Yeah, right.
Like maybe laughter in the crowd. I don't know. Like, what kind of king would that be? Maybe it's good news to those who are suffering. Maybe it's laughable to those who've never heard anything like this.
Yeah, right. This king will actually provide for you instead of dominate you, and this is radical, and that's a great encouragement. Yeah. So here's this encouragement that builds up to now. There are two ways to live. And the way of your king is very difficult. Mm-hmm. All right, this is hard. You're going to be swimming upstream. Yeah. Now he follows this with a warning. So, like we said, it's couched between an encouragement and a warning.
Okay. So the narrow wide gate is after what we've just read, before what we're about to look at.
Yeah. So now here's the warning that follows it. Okay. You know. So. Yeah. I feel like there's a musical term. Is it crescendo and denouement? Is that it?
Decrescendo.
Decrescendo.
Yeah, up and down.
Okay, so you've got the encouragement's like a crescendo. Then you've got the instruction. Yeah. And then you've got the decrescendo. Okay. I don't know. That just helps me.
Hey, I'm there.
You're there. So I'll let you read again. This is chapter 7, verses 15 through 20, and this is the warning.
Okay. Watch out for false prophets. Mm-hmm. They come to you in sheep's clothing. This is famous again, right?
It's all famous. Yeah. Like I said, it's amazing how much of this we really do have memorized.
We do, yeah. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inward they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them.
And then go.
You want me to keep going?
More? Yeah.
Okay, because I just got a little chilled when I read that part.
Well, I think this all goes together. Okay. And in this next paragraph kind of says the same thing, only in different words.
Okay. So verse 23 continues. Mm-hmm. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, 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 did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.
Yeah, and Rustin, the reason I had you read that with the part before it is because sometimes I think that we mistakenly take this out of context and we think that Jesus is given, that he's being scary to us. Right. And I guess there's legitimacy. Like, oh man, I don't want to be an evildoer. I don't want God to tell me, but I really think that in context, this is a way that Jesus is elaborating on the false prophets.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to understand that there are people out there that are going to be saying a lot of things in my name.
Yeah.
And I want you to understand that not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, is someone for you to follow, right?
Yeah.
Because this warning is all about who you're listening to.
That's good. Yeah, so I get it. So there is a personal warning in that we could very much be those leaders that he's talking about, but the crowd he's talking to are probably people who are subject to people who are telling them all sorts of things about what is true and who to follow, and Jesus is taking them to task, the false prophets. Yeah,
and there's kind of almost a futuristic element too, like this is what will happen. You just got to be on your guard for this thing. And again, I just have to draw back to this. I think the metaphor of leaving your child at school is so appropriate to this, because when you leave your kids, some of you guys know this and you're going to find this out, but whenever you leave your kid at school or wherever, one of your concerns as a father, as a parent, is who's going to mentor my child, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to teach my child? Who's going to instruct them? I mean, when they lived under my roof, I was really confident that they were always under my instruction. Like my wife and I, or whoever, we're able to do this kind of thing.
And that gave you confidence.
Yeah, we're greatly overestimating our own influence, but it's at least the illusion was there, right? That illusion was there.
Yeah.
But when you physically leave, and again, the metaphor only goes so far. But when you leave your kids, you're going, oh man, like. That's like we felt. I'll put it this way: we felt really good about Palmer because we were leaving them at K-State, and I have an old friend who leads a campus ministry at K-State. Right, so I had gotten in touch with my friend. Yeah. My friend came over the day that we moved Palmer into his dorm and helped us move into the dorm and got to know Palmer, and he started to reach out to Palmer. He took him to church one Sunday. He goes on walks every day through the campus, and he prays over Palmer when he passes that dorm, and he's getting him into his community, and that kind of thing gives us as parents great comfort, because we care about who is influencing our people. And so when I read this again, the Sermon on the Mount's winding down, Jesus has shifted his tone to kind of we're sending tone.
Yeah.
And I hear the heart of a parent here saying, okay, I care about who influences you.
Yeah.
I care about who is mentoring you.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you a word of warning, be careful.
Yeah, don't buy everything you hear.
Don't buy everything you hear, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, the emphasis of all of this is be careful, because there are going to be people who are saying things that sound right.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, they're going to be saying the right thing.
Right.
And I think this is a pertinent warning for us, because we're a culture who have, for whatever reasons, we put so much of an emphasis on what our teachers and our leaders and our mentors say. Yeah. Right? So if they're saying certain things, we follow them.
Yeah. We're all susceptible to it, man. And I had a friend a while ago say that churches that are really exploding with growth culturally, this was before 2020 and all the craziness of this year, but he said churches that are really successful numbers-wise, growth-wise, are the ones that are best at marketing to middle-class anxieties. And he wasn't making a judgment of good or bad of that, but it's the same sort of thing. You can catch people's ears by kind of marketing to what they're anxious about.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that those voices are the ones that are leading people into the kingdom or to healthy things or into honesty.
Right. The way that we are formed, I think, by the culture makes us focus on really, do I want to say cognitive or left brain type things? So for years and years, when I would hear, watch out for false prophets, they come to you in sheep's clothing, inwardly they're wolves. One of the first things I do is I go, well, what are they saying? Yeah. And then I'm going to open my Bible and I'm going to flip around and I'm going to test what they're saying.
Right.
Does it? And we feel good about that. Yeah. But if you read this closely, Jesus is saying, and not just here, by the way, in other places in the Gospels too, Jesus is saying the key is to look at how they live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That always seems to come down the ladder for us.
Right.
You know, but the key, in fact,
Yeah.
we have a culture where a lot
because the
of,
more successful you are, the less I care about how you live.
Yeah.
I just want to be around you because you're successful.
because you're successful, right?
Right.
We live in a culture that has, as we know, mega churches, and not to say mega churches are bad or anything, but when you are in a situation where your primary teaching is coming from someone that you don't know, and you don't know how they live, then I'm not saying don't listen to them, but I'm saying there's extra need to be cautious, right?
Yeah.
Just, I think, because the emphasis here is on how you live. That's what the good fruit means, bearing good fruit.
I always tell my friends here at Vox when I'm teaching, I'm like, this is the benefit, is that you guys all know my life. You know my kids, you know how they act.
Yeah.
So you know that when I'm up here saying something really confidently, you know what to listen to and what you can ignore.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've got my own inconsistencies, but that actually hopefully helps them discern what is true and where I might be confused about something, because we know one another.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. That's just so important. And, you know, and again, I think that those are good words that I would want to know as I leave my children to self-parent. And don't leave them, send them. The send is better than leave. I'm not leaving them, sending them to self-parent. I want to say, boy, there's still going to be mentors and teachers, and what I care about most is the character of those people, and it goes back to the narrow way. I mean, there is a narrow, rigorous way, and make sure that the people that are teaching you are living according to the rigor and giving ultimate attention to that.
Don't fall for the flashiest or the most eloquent, or look for how people actually live.
Right.
See what's worth emulating. And,
right.
Yeah.
These things matter much more than whether we're conjugating our verbs right, you know, and as we look at the Greek or whatever, you know, not to say that all that is not important, but
I love it, but it can be, I mean, as you know, I'm a huge nerd and I love studying scripture and all the Greek stuff. But what we're looking for is character and people who actually intend to do this stuff, not just know a lot about it.
Yeah. And if we had time, we could break down all the things to look out for. I mean, obviously, I think there's an element here of looking out for flashiness. Yeah. I mean, some of these things sound strange to us today, like performing miracles and driving out demons and prophesying in your name. Some of us have a hard time putting ourselves in context where we see that kind of thing happen. But what we have to remember, the emphasis here is just try not to get caught up in it. Like Jesus is saying, you can do all of that stuff, which in and of itself might be good, but it's not the litmus test of whether someone really knows me. I mean, really just knows me. The litmus test is the good fruit. The litmus test is the way that it goes back to that. This is the way of Jesus. Yeah.
The way. Yeah, I think that word is so powerful, and of course that's the word of Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. I've learned, like from Eugene Peterson, who emphasizes that we don't get the Jesus life or the Jesus truth unless we want to commit ourselves to the Jesus way. And that's not just a clever teacher thing to say. That's just really how it is. This is a life that can really only be understood, and barely at that, but from within obedience to it, willing to give ourselves fully to it. So I think that's what Jesus is doing in this whole part, is inviting us on this particular way. Way of life.
I think so too. How do we determine who it is that we listen to? Well, I mean, the Sermon on the Mount has given us that template. Look for people who are practicing loving their enemies and embodying humility and really practicing not judging. And I mean, the list goes, all the things we mentioned, the rigorous stuff that we got through mentioning. Look where people spend their money. Look at all these things matter, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The good fruit.
The good fruit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I hope I didn't beat the metaphor to death, but I want people to keep that metaphor in mind when you read through these passages of leaving your child, sending your child to college, in that emotional experience that I recently went through, where you're saying goodbye and you're driving away and going, boy, what do I want to tell them? What would the sending words be? And I think that kind of provides us a great handhold for this teaching.
I like it, and I like just the language of being sent, because it brings us back to who we are as the church, as disciples living in this world, that are not trying to separate ourselves from the world, but we are being sent into the world. And in this way, a master sending an apprentice out, or a friend sending a friend, as Jesus will soon say. But in a very real way, our Father in heaven has placed us here, has enlivened us through the Spirit, who's given us these words of life in Jesus, and is sending us back into our neighborhoods in a very difficult year where we've got any number of crises going on. Yeah. And we're all feeling it in the church in various ways. So this sense of coming back to this and feeling like we've got an orientation, and that we can build around this. We can be sent forward with some wisdom and with some eyes to see things as they are, some guardrails of like what to look for. So as we go about our week this week, even, I'm thinking like, where's the good fruit? Who's producing fruit? Who can I listen to? Because man, I need eyes for that right now in a really noisy world.
It's really true.
Yeah.
I remember having these conversations with you about leadership for the church. Like there's certain things that are easy to look at, and being caught up with certain flashiness and go, this person would be a great leader because they're so charismatic or whatever. But then you really helped me to go through a discipline of looking at humility and looking at character and looking at money. And looking at all these different things.
Yeah, all these hidden things. We have a joke now because the current makeup of our leadership council here in Vox, I think everybody that's on the council at some point just served on the cleaning team.
Yeah, right.
So I made this joke that isn't really a joke of like, where do we get our council people? Oh, they're the people off the cleaning team.
Yeah.
But in a Christian way, that's the fruit, man. It's humility, it's willingness to not make much of yourself, but to serve quietly for a purpose greater than yourself. And that's the kind of life Jesus is kind of forming in us as he gives us this whole sermon. Yeah,
there's a way that the world chooses leaders, and then there's a way that the church should choose leaders. And sometimes your best leaders aren't the most obvious. And I feel like that's a little bit of what Jesus is saying. You got to look below the surface.
Yeah, look for fruit.
Look for the fruit.
That takes a little time.
Yeah, takes some time.
Yeah.
So here you are, son. There are two ways to live. One is easy and one is not. And you need to live the way that's not.
Yeah.
If you're going to follow in the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
Let me encourage you by saying, I will always be here for you. I am with you, and I will give you whatever you need or ask for. And let me warn you by saying, as you decide who to follow and what mentors and leaders to listen to, you have to be careful, because there will be people saying the right things and even doing flashy things, but they're not necessarily the people you need to be following.
That's so good. So up front, the encouragement is, I got you. I'm with you. The warning is, watch out, be wise. And in the middle of that, it's up to you.
Yeah.
Right? It's left or right. And I shouldn't say left or right in a political season, narrow or wide.
Yeah.
But the promise is the narrow, hard path leads to life.
Yeah.
Life.
That's wholeness, peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which is what we all want for our children.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah. Thanks, Rustin.
Yeah. Well, amen, John. Thank you.
Yeah.